Hello, this is Tom, negotiating with Jesus. I want to do a little bit of something different today. I want to start to frame an adult kind of a meetup discussing how to form a youth group team or core team. And what I want to do is get some kind of a view of principles that can be agreed upon. One of the issues that the Methodist church and many other churches are having right now is as the culture kind of pressures and forms or directs discussion in some areas like the LGBTQ area and things of that nature, women's role in the church, egalitarianism, all these different issues that we're grappling with, and of course Black Lives Matter or white privilege. So many social issues are really seem to have bubbled to the surface. So I think it's good to have some kind of framework of what exactly we're doing and what we can agree upon. I'm not going to do a big discourse on what we don't agree upon because in some sense almost nothing is agreed upon among people. And Christians have this real central agreement that Jesus is the king. So, and from there we start saying, well, how do you serve a king? And what do you, oftentimes people who serve a king are fighting some kind of battle. And that's something I think we understand as battling. And we really, humans are battlers. We're battling our children, our spouses, our neighbors, our bosses, traffic jams. That's a great battlefront. So people are very accustomed to battling and often do not feel that rest that Jesus talks about. Come to me, you who are weary, and I'll give you rest. That rest is hard to find. So I think if we can find the resting places, it will be very welcoming, inviting to adults who want to be involved in the battle that is bringing Christ to the nations. If they can find also within the battle a place of rest and not battle with your own team. You don't want to be at battle with your own team. So friendly fire, that's killing a lot of Christians these days. Friendly fire, it's not ideal. We don't want to lose a lot to friendly fire. So the basic idea I want to get across is that Jesus is king. So it's this submission. That is one thing that I think in youth ministry we can agree upon, is that we're placing Jesus as king in this central role and using Scripture as our central and really great source to understand and know Jesus. So we want an elevated standing for Scripture and an elevated position for Jesus. So Jesus at the top, Scripture the way we understand and can come to know Jesus. And then I think my big focus is a couple of things that I think our culture is really struggling with. And one is, one of the things that's a major focus of mine is the idea of miracle, the idea of worship. So what I want to say in some general sense is that the world is full of wonder. It's an enchanted world, and we're a disenchanted people. And some of the lack of joy, the lack of excitement, is the idea that life gives you burdens, and it's hard to see the light at the end of the tunnel oftentimes. So if we can recapture that sense of wonder, that sense of joy, that sense of enchantment, that is a major problem with culture today, is a very disenchanted view. So that touches a lot of areas. It touches the idea of the naturalistic world, materialistic world, where an atheistic or materialist view is that there's no meaning. If it's all just random material actions with no direction, no purpose, there's a meaning crisis. So what I want to say is that the world is not just composed of meaningless material that is going to collect and eventually disperse and die, that life is some kind of strange phenomenon that doesn't mean anything, and eventually it will just be squashed by an uncaring, unsympathetic universe, impersonal. So to me, miracle is a central theme. And we all agree that life is filled with miracle. We agree in some intuitive sense. We don't necessarily agree in a rationalist sense, that we say things are miraculous. In some way, we agree with the scientific view that miracles don't exist, that there's no way to prove a miracle. And I think, in fact, miracles are all around us, and we name them, we call them out, we are aware of them, but struggle to stand firm when confronted and when challenged on faith and belief in miracles. So, like the miracle of childbirth, that children are this precious miracle that is more than just a natural event. It's some kind of strange wonder that consciousness and life emerges in this world that seems very to have great opposition against life. That sustaining life is the most insane thing that you could find in the entire universe. It's as near as we can tell, there's nothing but dead rock in the entire universe. And even as you see, these novas, supernovas, or whatever we think, these stars forming, and whatever we think about the areas where things are happening, it doesn't seem to produce life. Life is a very strange thing. And gas explosions are great, but you wouldn't want to be standing near one because they don't produce life. They seem to produce death. So I listened to an audiobook. I listened to college lectures. I was listening to Stephen Nowicki. He is a Duke biology professor. And he was explaining biology, the science of life, this long lecture course. And at one point, one of the most startling things that he said to me in this long lecture, like, 24 hours of this guy lecturing. At one point, he was talking about what happens right before life is formed, and these prebiots, this, I don't know if they were amino acids or something that were linking up, and, he's talking about how life can form. And this little thing passed, and it was probably the largest thing that he said, but it was just passed over. So he said something to the effect of this: it must have been a magical moment when non-living prebiots, whatever the phrase was about non-living particles, slipped into life and then just moved right along from there. And to me, I listened to it and thought, it just struck me that was the biggest thing that ever happened in the entire lecture, is that biology, the science of life, there was no life, and then there was this slip, and then there was life. And it was passed over so quickly and so, nonchalant. And I thought, you know what? I've seen things slip before. And when you slip, you're going to death. You're not going to life. There's no slipping into life. So for it to be some casual throwaway phrase is the state of the disenchanted world, where this miraculous thing is just overlooked. So as a non-scientist, I have to grapple with, as a layman, I have to grapple with the philosophical implications of these statements that have no real explanation, just kind of thrown out there and in faith, in some kind of faith. So miracle, big thing. And then the other thing, sin. I think sin is a very hard thing to discuss, because people want to point to it. They want to label other people as sinful. It kind of gives you a sense of a judgmental view. It sometimes positions you at a place, a higher place, holier than thou place, where you can judge others and not have yourself be judged. Sin is a very tough issue. And the last thing so I'll touch on these two things, is the problem of evil, or the problem of suffering, the problem of pain. I think one of the great struggles of our culture is the idea that God allows suffering. That is a great obstacle, a great thing to wrestle with. It is very hard to understand what the meaning of pain is, how God can allow suffering. And then the other thing is sin. And the gist of what I want to get to with sin goes right to the Garden of Eden, and this idea that God, in the beginning, God creates, which is the miracle aspect. God creates all things, and we know that we're in a universe that seems to have appeared from nothing. And the atheist argument, give me one miracle and I'll explain the rest. Well, the one miracle is the creation of all things. It's like an insanely large miracle. If you give that away, wow, that's amazing. So give me one miracle, I can explain the rest. So God creates the heavens and the earth, and this whole process, and then humans, created in His image. And He says, look, there's a sense that God made everything perfect and beautiful and just glorious, and there's this interaction between man and God, and it's precious, it's divine, it's wonderful. And God created humans in His image, men and women in God's image. And then we see the appearance of evil, this snake character who says to humans, look, God told you one thing, I'm going to tell you something different. And a choice is made. And it's the pivotal moment in each human life or in all of humanity, when some kind of choice was made. Satan, representing evil, representing every bad thing, says, look, God's keeping something back from you. He says you can't eat from this tree. This tree in the middle, the tree that contains the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. God says you can't eat from that, but I tell you, if you would eat that, you would be like Him, knowing good and evil. So that is the pivotal choice. Is God says, I'll tell you, I'll decide what's good and evil. I know what's good and evil. Leave it to me. And then people, hearing Satan's words, say, boy, if I could be like God, knowing good and evil, that's pretty tempting. This fruit looks very good. It would give me wisdom. So what happens is they are tempted and they fall to temptation and eat the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And then all of a sudden, everything is changed. Now the choice leads to a couple things. One is that humans were made in God's image. They already were like God. And Satan, the great deceiver, said, no, you'll be like God if you disobey God. So we've decided at that moment, humanity's course was set to be an enemy of God, that we would like to decide what's good and evil. And this is the big conflict in all the world, is that people, all of us agreeing with Satan, I would like to decide what is good. And each of us, our own little individual God says, I will decide what is good. I will decide what is good. And we find that we are constantly disagreeing about what is good. And we are constantly fighting. Not only do we fight God, but we fight each other. Constantly disagreeing with what is good and being totally committed to this idea that Satan, the deceiver, presented to us. If you can decide, you will be like God. And we're like, yeah, that sounds right to me. And now we're constantly fighting in every aspect of our lives, whether it's fighting with your children or fighting with your spouse or fighting with your neighbors, fighting with other countries, fighting for economic security, fighting for your life. It is a constant fight, because I'm saying what's in my interest, the things that I like, I'm calling good. And the things that oppose that, I'm calling evil. So we are constantly fighting for ourselves, and it's some kind of selfish enrichment, a self-serving commitment. And it puts us in opposition to God, and also it makes us very open to fighting. And we see it in our political system, which is as fractious and as unpleasant as it can possibly be, with everybody saying, fighting for opposing positions and being as angry and hurt and contentious as we can be. So the idea that we're fighting, and then we have an election and a leader is chosen, and then half the population says, hold it a minute, I didn't choose that person. I thought I was supposed to be able to decide. And a large swath of humanity left out, the losers. I thought I was able to decide, and it's very upsetting. They're very angry. I was told by Satan himself that I could decide. And then, without it dawning on us, oh, maybe Satan lied. Maybe Satan lied about this whole game that we're in. And we're constantly in total agreement with him, thinking we can decide, and then finding out that he lied to us. When we decide, we end up doing nothing but fighting. So the second big point, what things do we need to agree on? 1, miracle, enchantment. 2, our agreement with Satan. It is the total depravity that Calvin talks about, is we believe that we are little gods. And it is not working to our favor. If you take a look around and see, a society in some way crumbling and in ruins, or potentially facing devastation. And then third, the problem of evil. I think we have to be able to have some answer for this idea that God is allowing suffering. So ever since the expulsion from the garden, when we voluntarily said we will be in rebellion from the good place, there's this interesting show on Netflix called The Good Place, which I watched it for a season and a half or 2 seasons. The first season was particularly interesting. The good place, when we rebelled against the good place, we live in the bad place, and we see wars and fighting and death and suffering and disease. And how does God allow that? Well, the fact is, almost daily, almost hourly, almost minute by minute, we make a choice that we don't want to be submitting to God in this good place. We want to make our way in the bad place and fight for our positions. And wars and suffering seems to be something that we in some way choose, and it is an argument that's not easy to present. It's not easy to accept, because people in some sense, believe everything is thrust on us, that it's not our choice to suffer. And in some sense, it is not. It is not our choice to suffer. But in another sense, it is very clear that we're not a submissive type creature. We want to battle. And the idea, no pain, no gain, that is ingrained in us. So looking for pain and thinking, I must go through pain in order to find my my happy place, or my Eden, or my paradise, or even my my growth. No pain, no gain. We'll hold these two paradoxical, opposing views and say, pain and suffering should not be part of existence. And then we'll also hold, a view that opposes that. If we're not willing to go through the pain, we can't have gain, get any advancement in our lives. So no pain, no gain is a very strange phrase that we agree with. And when you go to the gym and exercise and feel that good pain, like your muscles are being worked and you're growing, there's something true about the phrase, but there's also something true, very true, about this idea that the world ought not it ought not have suffering. And it seems like needless suffering. So then we become the judge of, I like this suffering, okay. I get this suffering, but if it's not the suffering that I approve of, it should not be here. This idea of what the world ought to be. So those are three issues that are going to be central to me. I'm going to try and frame that a little better. And I'm going to try and do videos where I can discuss and maybe have some guests and some discussion. I want to use the YouTube forum for presenting ideas. So there it is. It is the idea of miracle, the idea of suffering, and the idea of sin. These are three areas that I think we have to have as a focus. And we'll expand on that another time. Thank you. And this is Negotiating with Jesus. Tom, I'll talk to you later.